Thanks so much, Pat. I suppose I'm absolutely honoured to be here today. I think it's a fantastic forum, a forum that is so rich in conversation. It's an opportunity for me to catch up with colleagues from so many walks of life. That was my introduction to computing, Commodore 64. I was trawling through boxes that my mother had hoarded away that we didn't want. She died 6 years ago and we didn't want to touch them. I found instructions for the data set unit with instructions like turn off the computer and plug in the data set. Turn the computer on, press the play button. That's how far we've come on in a short space of time. I'm old enough to have been on the receiving end of one of these, and I'm young enough to have taught with one of them as well. Or did I get that wrong? The pupils in Attimass National School have access to their own devices. They're starting at a different point. They have access to their own accounts. They create their own content. Their own content is accessible from any of the devices in the school. We upgraded the ICT infrastructure of the school thanks to some fantastic advice from my former colleague Tom Lonergan. We have access to Lego WeDo kits, we have Lego Mindstorms, we have a range of technology, but the main thing is how will all of this impact on teaching and learning in the school? What is my school? Or what was my school? I changed jobs this week. Okay, but my school had 43 pupils, has 43 pupils. It represents 40% of primary schools in Ireland because 40% of schools in Ireland have less than 4 teachers, have less than 100 pupils, and let us not lose sight of that. There's 26%, I think it is, range between 101 and 200 pupils, and the rest are in excess of 200 pupils. And we've actually, the principal of the biggest primary school in the country is here. John Weir is up there. So he's a completely different set of challenges. But together we present a front for primary education in Ireland. I downloaded the data from the Department of Education just to give you a profile. The blue schools have less than 4 teachers. The red schools have between 4 and 8. So all of them have teaching principals. And the yellow schools are the administrative principals. Anyone know what county is at the bottom? As in the bottom of the map of the graph here, with the greatest number of yellow schools and the smallest number of blue schools. Dublin. What's the one at the top? Mayo. Couldn't be Mayo, God. Right, Leitrim is a good guess. Carlow. Yeah. Interesting trends, if you interrogate it, is the commuter belt, sorry, it's Longford, sorry. The commuter belt counties are the ones where the number of blue is decreasing at an alarming rate and the number of yellow is increasing. And the ones on the western seaboard, look at Mayo at the bottom, 113 less than 4 teachers, right up to only 22. So don't lose sight of that 40%, okay? And that's some of the data there, okay? Really my work, for the last 2 years, has been trying to see, can I realize the potential of digital technologies, not just to enhance teaching, learning and assessment, but that the kids in the school, can they really become knowledge constructors? Can they become global citizens? And I'm going to give you an insight into my classroom just to see, well, have you achieved that? So what role have I occupied as a teacher? Well, I've tried to be a reflective practitioner. I've tried to be a constructivist. I've tried to adopt a constructivist pedagogical orientation and engage in ongoing assessment. What about my pupils? Well, I certainly hope they're active learners. Can they find and select information? Can they manage it? Can they create and collaborate? The theme of our conference here. Can they reflect on their learning? And along the way, can I allow them to create their own digital portfolios? And that's really what I've tried to do. I've struggled with the term creativity for the past few weeks, actually, because I always felt it was an individual endeavor. something that Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci, these geniuses were creating, they were making things grow. And then someone said, yeah, well, what about creative accounting? And then I began to question creativity. And I looked at individual creativity. So you might look at stories that evolved in J.K. Rowling's mind, or Michelangelo with his, fantastic creations. And then you look at collective creativity. And this is one that came from the kids. They said, well, Elon Musk doesn't build the cars. He has to have armies of people and brilliant people to program them who buy into his vision. And the same with Sher Wang, the chairperson of HTC. All of these devices are being created by collective creativity. And really, that's our challenge for the future. And that I was a little bit happier now, because now I was blending creativity and collaboration. So really, that's the backstory. One of the books I had to read in St. Pat's a few years ago, many years ago, it wasn't the 14th edition of it either, was looking into classrooms. And at that particular time, when you leave college and you know everything, and now when you're 30 years later and you realize, I don't know anything at all, or very little, I couldn't identify with those classrooms. But now I'm going to invite you into my classroom. And the voice of my poor colleague David McMahon, who graced the CESI conference a number of years ago, was ringing in my head, because he said, he would always say, leave them with Monday morning ideas. Don't be given any of these theoretical frameworks, Monday morning ideas, and that's what I hope to do. The first thing a kid in Attimass has been able to do is to grab a piece of technology and capture digital images. Sometimes they're opportunities to learn, sometimes they're evidence of learning. Now, this was one of my own kids, was enthralled by the sand patterns on Lacken Beach a number of months ago. And they said, were those created by water or by wind? And I wasn't sure. We came to the conclusion that they were created by wind, because it was a particularly windy day. And I don't think water was going to give you those patterns. And then they said, that looks like the contours of a map, which is correct. They were looking, and I said, he was only 7 at the time, and I said, how do you know about contours? Do you not remember that you brought us to Seafest? And I was enthralled because John Heffernan, in his workshop this morning, showed a similar sandbox that was created over in Albemarle. And what my kids were able to do at that stage was to manipulate the sand into contour lines. And they had the language, the lexicon of contour lines from there on in. So I was bringing this back to Attimass using the fantastic tools that are in SkelNet Maps. They had to find their own school, they had to find their own house, they had to measure the distance, they had to plot the profile, they had to build the mountains with cardboard. They had to find their school on Google Earth, find their house on Google Earth, and all of these things are the skills of a geographer. People look at that picture and see those 2 trees on the picture. They're not there anymore. There's a long story with that one. Then we came across, through the Twitter community, reference to icograms, a way of building villages and towns. And that's one I would recommend. A lovely little package, one of those Monday morning ideas. Try it this evening, it'll work Monday morning. You can build little villages, all the little images are created for you. And it just gives a sense of perspective, because everything is to scale. That's the kids building their little villages there, and they're trying to put their own house relative to the village. Then they started building some of the buildings in SketchUp, which is free for schools. And then the next task was to create. So in one case, they were creating houses, masks, and how are they holding all those cardboard constructions together? Well, this is another one that was recommended through a Twitter feed on the CESI community, was the Make Do Kids. I think it was either Chris Rayner or Hassan or some one of those. And these are remarkable just for taking digital images and create. I must have cursed or something today. okay. Is that it? Okay. Just to get my train of thought. Yeah. So really what we were trying to do is to bring from the digital into the maker space. And one of the most useful tools we found was that those make-do cardboard construction kits. Again, a Monday morning idea. And if you want to see children engaged in trying to transform their digital designs into 3D objects, that's one that will really encapsulate. GeoGuessr, where they're not just looking at their own locality, but it throws up images of anywhere in the world, and they have to go down the road or up the road and see can they spot a sign, see can they read what language is it in, does it look like a rich country, a poor country. GeoGuessr can't beat it, and it's not just edutainment, it's educational. There was a project at one stage, it was one of those mountain of projects that comes in to primary schools, but this one caught my eye, and it was looking at children's vision of health in the future and healthcare. And one of the kids in the class was quite upset because one of their relatives was just after having a stroke, and they were trying to describe it. So I went out to the Twitter community and I said, is there any way that I can manipulate a photograph to make it look like a stroke? So one person from America came back to me and said, try Plotiverse. And then when you do it, whoops, sorry, that should have played. See the effect it's creating there? And they were so engrossed in this project that what they want, we entered the competition, and the kids came up with this idea that we would create what was called a Stroke Star app. We published it on a little intranet ourselves, that it was building on facial recognition. And one of the kids came up with the idea that if you can unlock your phone through facial recognition, well then if half of your face isn't functioning properly, it should dial 999 to the local stroke support unit. And that was at the core of the idea. And they even built what the device was going to look like. They said, this is the stroke victim looking into the facial recognition. They were trying to building clays of it. They tried to build what it would look like with their own faces. They tried to say, well, it would virtually connect you to the doctor using Skype, and that it would locate you wherever you are in the world. And they even went to Minecraft and said that's what your hospital bed would look like in a few years. Now, I suppose really what I'm trying to show is that out of sometimes what you might think to be the most ridiculous ideas come huge levels of creativity and huge levels of collaboration. Christmas week, we had an unexpected visitor. The 2 trees that were outside the school were blown over last year, and a security fence was put in place, but no one told the sparrowhawk that was living locally. So the sparrowhawk crashed into the fence. One of our farm-based 6th class, who was well used to handling animals, grabbed the sparrowhawk. I was rushing off for our what do I do when a bird of prey crashes into the school policy. Couldn't find it. And another kid grabbed a device so we'd have evidence. So this fantastic animal had suddenly landed in our school, and I said, what do we do? Well, you go to Twitter and you say, help Twitter, beautiful bird has just crashed into the school fence. It's injured, what do we do? Because it's not something you can bring to an ordinary vet. Within a few minutes, we got responses. First of all, saying, be careful that boy, you don't know what that sparrowhawk has had in its claws in the last few minutes, and I'm panicking. But anyway, Mount Falcon estate rang and they said, we'll take the hawk, we'll get it checked for you, we'll pay the veterinary bills. And so Martin from Mount Falcon estate, we left it into him. He took great care. He gave us a huge amount of information about birds of prey, so that saved me doing it again. And we also learned 3 words or phrases that are in English that are derived from falconry. So hoodwinked, so that a bird of prey is so sensitive to everything around them, the only way you can block off is put a hood on them. For all the females present, you'd be delighted to know that in the world of falconry, the females occupy the top of the tree. What do you mean? Right. And if a male attempts to go up into the higher levels of the tree, they get a peck down. So that's why there's a pecking order, and that's why an awful lot of males are henpecked. So I'll move swiftly along, okay? I suppose one of the sites I keep going back to time and time again is duchas.ie. I was telling my own kids 2 days ago that my grandfather was arrested as a fisherman in the River Foyle because they couldn't at that time make up their minds whether he was violating Republic of Ireland laws or Northern Ireland laws. And a court case evolved as a result, and of course you can see the parallel with what happened in Clogherhead. And, you know, I have found this to be just a remarkable place to look at the stories that were collected from schools between 1937 and 1939. And another publication that was only produced in digital format related to Dr. Kathleen Lynn, who is a Mayo-born survivor of the 1916 Rising. She fought in the 1916 Rising. She set up Ireland's first children's hospital. And the kids were really intrigued with this, that someone from only 9 miles away could have had this impact over 100 years ago. At one stage, she was so upset that older children couldn't get the care, she approached an architect and said, will you design me a new hospital? Now, you might be able to see where this one is going. And a design, how novel of it, was to have this hospital built on the Grand Canal in Dublin. Where is the new one being built? On the Grand Canal. Now, poor old Kathleen Lynn, the project got a belt of the crozier because Dr. Charles McQuaid said, my answer is quite simple. I oppose this amalgamation on religious principles solely. I consider that in such a united institution, the faith of Catholic children would not be safe. And yet we still haven't resolved it. But look at this, the link with education. St. Ultan's was acknowledged by international visitors as a child-centred hospital, and even Maria Montessori was there in 1934 and recognized that the child-centred approach to medicine in her hospital echoed what she was doing in education. And the kids were incensed. What can we do? And then there was a thing that the hospital was going to be called the Phoenix Medical Centre. And they said, Minister, our class think the new children's hospital should be named after Dr. Kathleen Lynn, and we're children. We didn't get a response. But if I go back to, my challenge was to see, could we make them global citizens, remember? That's one of the visions of the digital strategy. So on that regard, we felt we had made our contribution to global citizens. Now, this is an interesting one. I was preparing a confirmation class. Thou shalt not steal. And for me, this was one of the last bastions of rules from 2,000 years ago. Look what is in the new version of this. Do not waste energy. Use things well that belong to everyone, such as the seats on the bus or a school computer. Do not copy music, movies, or computer games illegally. That is in the UCAT for kids. So they're moving on, we're embracing technology, and we're seeing that technology is impacting on everything we're doing. Collaboration in the classroom is not easy. In my room, there was 4 classes, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. You're expected to cover the 4 grades, although in reality what you do is you group 3rd and 4th together, 5th and 6th together. You differentiate. But for projects, they're at different stages of readiness. Getting third class pupils to work together and getting sixth class pupils to work together is a challenge. We got advice, certainly on the use of Lego and things like that, from a local autism supports advisor who suggested that you actually have 3 defined roles: the supplier, the builder, and the engineer. Each child is in that role for exactly 5 minutes and then they change. Because the default position, believe me, is everyone wants to be the builder. In fact, everyone wants to be everything. They want to get the bricks, they want to build. And that is something that I could not recommend enough. I think it works very, very well, and it sets them up well for other project-based tasks as well, because they can see they cannot always be the one leading the project. Or in turn, they cannot always be the one saying nothing either. That's just those. Another thing I'd recommend is that kits like that, like the Lego we do or Mindstorms, they start off and you finish them in the same way. The pieces have to be in the same places. Otherwise, in a large class, it just degenerates into chaos. The fiche film process is a fantastic project for any school to get involved in. Children write their story, they write their storyboards, but there's a challenge. And last year, I got each class to produce their own little film. I'll just talk about 5th and 6th. Class 1, they adhered to process, they had detailed storyboards, but I found myself encouraging them to seek alternatives because I felt they weren't creative enough. But they got their film finished. The other class had limited storyboards, they were all strong characters, they preferred to change their ideas all the time, they preferred to ad-lib when they were shooting the film, they were all movie stars themselves. I was encouraging them to concentrate on their story. They struggled to get it finished as they argued about story changes and who were the main stars. So collaboration is sometimes bandied about as being, oh yeah, we should all be doing this, but it's hard work. And, you know, not to lose sight of that. For reading content, I found this site brilliant, especially in a multi-class classroom, Newsella, because you can take topics. Every so often there'll be a topic, a global topic, and what you can do, if you can see it in the black button just up there, you can adjust the Lexile rating of the article. So what you can do is you can print off the same article 4 times, but it has 4 different reading levels. So you're talking to your 4 classes about a topic, but they're reading the article at 4 different reading levels. And that is a fantastic thing to be able to access. And you can have a very strong reader in 4th class, but you can give them the 6th class version that you've printed off. And it doesn't embarrass or anything else, or you just on their device tell them you can switch it from 1050 down or 1050 up. So what do the children do? Well, they write their stories, but they write their stories on paper. They write them on documents as well. It's not always computer-based, far from it. They can create slides. They can present their slides, which I think is a huge part as well. It's not just create them, they should be able to present them. And what we did this year was each child created their own learning site, and they embedded what they would call their good work into the site. And this is our first foray into digital portfolios at primary level. And I have found that that has been a real enriching experience, not just for me as the teacher, but also for the pupils themselves. They take so much care into what goes into their learning site because they want to share their learning site with their parents, and suddenly it has a level of currency. My worry about learning sites and sites like that is in what can, I suppose, I'll tell the story. My mother was a huge hoarder. I can access my 3rd class copies and my 4th class copies from Dunnes Stores bags that were wrapped in elastic. But if my child puts their work into a digital portfolio, will they be able to access it in 15 years' time? Is there going to be a level of support there that will ensure that all of that is available? And that's just a fear I have. I don't have an answer. For computational thinking, in the school, we prioritized it as a problem-solving methodology, But we felt we didn't know enough, so we had to engage in a lot of the reports that were out there. I found this one the best because the report was very accessible and it gave plenty classroom examples. So it's produced from the Joint Research Centre in Seville. It really asked, well, what is computational thinking? How can we confine it, define it even? The core characteristics of it, how are teachers going to be trained effectively? Really what we were focusing on is algorithmic thinking, breaking down everything into smaller steps. We used BBots for the junior classes. We used Lego WeDo as we went up through the classes. And then we graduated onto Scratch and in recent months, HTML. It wasn't all about coding, it was all about problem solving. These are kind of the middle classes. They have a BBot. It's not just about moving forward or backward, it's about engaging in a complex task. And probably one of the best moments I had in the past year is this video here. A group were struggling to solve this task here. And I don't know what possessed me just to stand over them, chance putting on the video and seeing could they work it. And eventually the penny dropped. See this girl here with her hand turned sideways? She decided she was going to turn the BBot off. They were trying to do it by leaving the BBot on. She decided she was going to turn it off. And watch this. She's telling the kid over here the instruction. But for me as a teacher, it's her hands that actually tell me she has learnt it. Right? And I asked her, what were you doing? And she said, I was looking through the eyes of the BBot. So suddenly the penny dropped. Instead of standing over it, trying to solve it, I need to look as though I'm the BBot, and then right and left makes sense. And I didn't have the scientific term for it, but Seymour Papert did. And seeing that it was compulsory to get a Seymour Papert quote in today, right? And it's body syntactic reasoning, okay? And it's referring to the child's sense of his or her own body. And for me, that was one of the most fulfilling aspects of introducing computational thinking and problem solving. And it's those moments that a teacher lives for. And that's one thing that this type of work does open up possibilities for. We were happy that problem solving in our school was advancing as a result of this work. We engaged in the BBRIS Challenge for Schools, and again, another one that I would highly recommend. Why? Because it promotes problem-solving skills and informatics. The children have to be able to break down complex tasks. It looks at algorithmic design, pattern recognition, pattern generalization, and abstraction. It had its origins in Estonia, and the Estonian word for a beaver, or being as busy as a beaver, is BBRIS. It happens every year on the second week of November, and there's worldwide BBRIS Week. You get a certificate that can be printed off, and we were challenged, and the kids really, really enjoyed that. And this year it became a focus for our EU Code Week. We put an awful lot of effort into Code Week. We put on an event for teachers and parents in the local area. I would have to say a sincere thanks to Cornelia Connolly, who came down and gave a talk. You'll see her at the back of the picture there. And that was something that was so affirming for the children in the school, that someone was coming, imagine, they were coming from a university to talk to us, all right? And there's only 43 of us. You know, it was something that really impacted on them. And our EU Code Week website is available. It's linked on that slide there. But I'll get back to my thoughts on creativity. Is it always positive? Anyone know what the serpentine ramp was? I don't think so. It promoted a huge debate at the time it was invented. And what it was for, it'll make a bit more sense if I tell you this is an abattoir. right? So what it was is that it was a means of blinding cattle for their eventual fate, okay? And it promoted huge debate as to the negative side of creativity. Now, some people argue it has been used positively by the likes of Euro Disney and Tato Park and all of these for making you feel you're making progress in a queue, right? Even though you know this is only a trick, right? But it makes me feel good because I'm moving, okay? It wasn't at lunch today. And so the serpentine ramp, any other negative? Okay, the atomic bomb. Okay, Kalashnikov was probably a genius of an engineer, but the name is more associated with the negative side of creativity. The sticking plaster was a remarkable invention, but not for this race of people. This man is wearing a sticking plaster as well, right? Have you got how something might start off as positive can suddenly turn very, very negative? And I think sometimes the education, the people who are trying technology in classrooms are often on the receipt of a backlash when something goes wrong, okay? So you've made the brave decision, you've convinced your school leader, I'm going to introduce technology, and suddenly there's cyberbullying. Shut it down. What were you doing introducing it? You've betrayed by, you know, and it's the behavior, not the technology. So with creativity, we have to flesh out the debate of the right and the wrong, and to expect that for every positive use, we're probably going to get a negative use as well. Colleagues in WebWise team have developed this fantastic resource for primary teachers, HTML Heroes. Any primary teachers here, it's brilliant. It's very practical. It addresses the concerns of parents and students alike. Again, I'll try not to finish on a negative note, but really what I was challenging myself for the last 2 years is that I wanted to be, remember, a reflective practitioner. I wanted my children in the class to be active learners, and I wanted them to have digital portfolios. And that's the type of work that is not just happening in the school I was in, but in many primary schools all around Ireland. And there are people here in this community who are more than happy and more than willing and more than capable of contributing to that. I will conclude with this slide. It's probably one thing I would always come back to is that sometimes there are a lot of questions, and and same on the CESI forum, about what's the right device, what's the right platform, what's the right amount of time to spend with it, the best software, the best digital textbook. But really, it's down to the teachers, the school leaders who have the aptitude, the disposition to see that we can make the links between students, technologies, computers, and learning. So on that note, I'd just like to thank you for your attention. Hopefully I got through it at a reasonable rate. I was a bit pushed for time. To wish the continued success of the CESI community. You do not realize how unique this is, that anyone from any level can ask for help and get ideas by the dozen. So thank you very, very much.